Hello.
Hi,
Oh,
good afternoon, everyone.
hello. I'm sorry. I was just trying to finish up with a call.
Hi, Jackie. We are just waiting for a couple more minutes and
Yeah,
to get
sure.
more people to sign on.
How many people have you got signed up today?
Um, Anna will give you
For
that
the,
data.
for the whole series, Jackie, we've got around 150. But we don't know from one week to the next how many of those people will come on. But a lot of people watch also the recording afterwards when we send it out with all the resource pages and everything. But it's
Fabulous.
averaging, 50, 60 people each time. So
Do you want me to keep an eye on chat? If I see any requests for any links from us, I'll pop
sure,
those into the chat.
sure.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jackie.
cool.
And one more minute, hopefully we can start. Okay, everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to series 4 of our Great Change, Great Women. And hi, my name is Nasser Siavi. I'm the Chief Executive of Microlink. Over to you, Anna.
Hello, everybody. Yes, we've got the privilege of having the wonderful Dr. Nancy Doyle with us today. Really looking forward to this. We've got some really good questions to ask Nancy, put her right on the spot. Just going to tell you a little bit about our housekeeping section. There will be a Q&A at the end, so please put any questions in the chat. Please be respectful to all others. We want everyone to feel welcome, safe and respected. Our accessibility features today, we have a captioning service by MyClearText. If you want to switch on the captioning, it's at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Closed captioning shows subtitles. And you can follow the conversation with hashtag Great Change, Great Women on all social media. So, Nancy, welcome. I'm very happy that you could make it today. I'm just going to give a little bit of background about you. So Dr. Nancy Doyle is a chartered psychologist in organizational and occupational psychology and the founder and owner of Genius Within CIC, a social enterprise dedicated to facilitating neurodiversity inclusion through consultancy, talent assessment, workshops and coaching for businesses. Nancy works with customers in finance, technology, defense towards the future, where all neuro-minorities are able to maximize their potential and work to their strengths. But I haven't finished yet. So where else we got to? So Nancy has co-created and featured in both series of the award-winning BBC Two series Employable Me. That was a really, really great show, I have to say, where she supported a group of extraordinary job seekers to unlock their own unique talents and abilities to secure employment. Syndicated in 2019 in the USA as The Employables, Nancy continued to deliver the trademark positive assessments and employable genius group coaching with some extraordinary individuals as they search for work. So that's both sides of the pond, UK and America. Yeah, she was the star of the show. The show has been incredibly successful in showing that neurodiversity should not be a barrier to employment. In 2019, Dr. Nancy Doyle launched the Celebrating Neurodiversity Awards. The awards recognize the individuals, businesses and projects that have gone above and beyond to promote accessibility and inclusion for neuro-minorities. Growing year on year, the 2021 awards received 110 nominations. Winners and runners-up were announced at an online ceremony attended by over 200 people, at which NASA wore a bow tie, which I remember. Nancy is a research fellow with Birkbeck University of London, having completed her doctoral research at City University of London. Nancy advises NGOs, international and national civil servants and political groups on how to improve disability inclusion. In 2019, she was recognised by the British Psychology Society with an award for her contribution to policy impact in occupational psychology. And Nancy is also a Forbes contributor and regularly active on social media channels. My goodness, Nancy. when you read it like that, it's a huge accomplishment.
Well, I would add some more to that if you want.
There
Because,
are, yes, there's a lot more.
That's a lot more. And this lady's amazing. It's a force of nature indeed. And if you ever follow her in either social media, Twitter or your LinkedIn, you always see her always first on the ranking. So and she's done so much for the neurodiversity. We've been working with Nancy for a good 8 years now, I think.
Yeah.
And she supported all our clients with all the neurodiversity work that we do. And we couldn't be prouder to be partners with her. So welcome to this show. And you are our fourth guest, not in that ranking order. You're as on top with the rest of them. So we're really delighted you're with us today. So we would like to enjoy and learn from Nancy Doyle.
Yeah, and I've got some really interesting questions.
Yeah.
So, do you want to say anything, Nancy, before we launch into
No, just thanks
our
for
discussion?
thanks for having me. I'm enjoying the idea of this series. I think it's a really, good thing to do. I've seen the other women that you've put me in the category of, so that's quite nice. I feel blessed by that. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, one of the strange things, NASA pointed it out, when we started thinking about this campaign, which was originally thought of by Connor, a colleague of ours at Microlink, and NASA pointed out that all the women at the moment, all the people that are so active in the disability world and really, making things happen are women.
Mm.
And we hadn't made that connection, had we, NASA, until you said, well, actually, they're all great women. And then we were like, oh my goodness. I mean, maybe there will be a great change, great men series, but for now, the women are, we're going to be doing a continued series starting on June the 3rd. So we'll have a couple of weeks off after Jenny Leigh Flurry from Microsoft on the 13th. And then we'll have a couple of weeks off and then we're launching again in June. And we've got some amazing women for the second series as well. So it's great. So I'm just going to get on and ask you this question.
So let me ask Nancy this. You're a psychologist. Why is it that women are so great in leading on such issues?
On such issues, on all issues?
No, these are important issues in society.
I don't think it's got anything to do with gender.
Isn't it? Okay. Well, as I said, I find that for many years I've been working, I do find really inspiring leadership in a lot of the women. As you said, might be just coincidental, but they are such amazing people. And
I mean, it's more socially acceptable for women to be leaders in kind of helping roles. So, where we have big imbalances in female leadership, the imbalance isn't as great in the kind of charitable NGO voluntary sector. There are a lot more women leaders in that space. There's I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head, but Helen Barnard, CEO of the Roundtree Foundation. You find a lot more female CEOs in this space generally, but that's kind of society's choice rather than female leaders' choice, I think.
Good point. Good answer.
Yeah.
So we can ask you the other questions now.
Yeah, I'm going to go straight in. So, what do you spend most of your time doing? You're a mother to twin boys. You're a businesswoman, an academic, a TV star. How do you fit it all in?
I spend a lot more time doing nothing than people know. You just don't see or hear me for a while. Do you know?
Really?
Yeah.
Because whenever I talk to you, or whenever you're busy everywhere. You're everywhere. You're so passionate about what you do.
Well, I have ADHD, and so I'm even if I'm not feeling passionate, I come across as passionate because that's the way we speak and that's the way we do things. And so, when you have ADHD, you don't have enough dopamine. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that makes you feel satisfied. And so I don't feel satisfied very often. I have to carry on and carry on and carry on and keep going. And then every now and again, I fall over and have to lie down for 3 days in a darkened room, and recover and bring my energy back.
But I must say, my daughter said, "Oh, I've got ADHD." I said, "Great! So that's another plus in your against your talent."
Yeah, well, people with ADHD are twice as likely to start a business after graduating than neurotypicals.
And she does work very hard. She got 100% in her degree assignment, and she's doing architecture and engineering, the toughest university in the world. So,
Brilliant.
100%. Wow.
Yeah, 100%. And she, before she said, I don't think I'm going to do well this year. There you go. That's the answer. But they absolutely unique people, and as every other neurodiverse person is, but they really do work, and they so much energy, and then suddenly they got to take time out. And
absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah. Some weekends I don't get off the couch. You know, I just like lie down, binge a box set, and do nothing. I spend a lot of time chilling out. I also have a little dog, and I take a dog for a walk every day, and those things. And I run. I do a lot of running, and those things kind of keep me sane. Yeah, I also have, I have a great partner. My husband is an amazing father and an amazing partner. They say that women marry their glass ceilings. So, I've married someone who actually enjoys being a father and picks up a lot of the fathering role, which I wish was more common than it is. It's kind of, I think my mother's generation of feminists, they kind of did, have it all thing, but actually that didn't change the behavior of the men in that generation. And I'm Generation X, and of my cohort of friends, I would say half of us have married people who will take on 50% of the home duties and the parenting duties, and 50% of them haven't. And it has made a big difference to people's careers, and it makes a big difference to what people think is possible and what people are doing. So yeah, but that's half the reason I started Genius Within, because my husband and I used to we were both working as consultants, independent consultants, and we would take turns to go away, and then on the odd occasion that we had a clash, we would call grandma, hi grandma. But when our kids started school, grandma doesn't like, so grandmas, I've discovered, are great child carers if the childcare required is go to the park, go to bed late, eat ice cream, do what you want. When childcare is put your shoes on, it's time to go, have you brushed your teeth, where's your bag,
homework,
they're not as into that. And I kind of get, I mean, I have 15-year-olds, and I don't think, and I've also got my 4-year-old niece staying with me at the moment, and it's like, whoa man, this is hard work. So I understand why grandmas don't want to do that. But my husband and I kind of looked at what we were doing, and we decided that with my consultancy that I could do the nearby clients and subcontract the far away clients, and that would be financially viable for us. And so, yeah, the first year Genius Within had 7 subcontractors, the second year 25, the third year 52, and then all of a sudden it was a proper full-time job again.
But you love what you do.
I do.
And you're making a difference, so.
Yeah. I love my company. I do. It's amazing work, and it's amazing. It's an amazing privilege. That's for sure.
You've got great people. We work with so many of your colleagues, and I'm absolutely delighted with their ethos as well as the quality. Everything they do is brilliant, first class.
And always excellent feedback from our clients who work with your team. Yeah, I know you get a lot of praise, I expect.
We do impact evaluation, so we don't just kind of provide a service and then ask people, did you like it? Yes. Did you like it? Yes. That kind of evaluation tells you how much they liked you. It doesn't tell you whether or not the work makes a difference. So what we like to do is to go back 3 months later and talk to people's bosses and talk to them and say, right, how are you now, 3 months after the training, 3 months after the coaching, whatever you've had. And so from that feedback, we can pick up quite a lot about our own learning, and what we need to do more of, what we need to do less of, where people need more training because they're not getting the results that they need to get. So we invest an enormous amount of time in evaluation and checking that what we're doing is actually working. And I know you guys do that as well at Microlink. So I think that's where you get good service as part of a system. You can have good people, but the system is providing a good service when it checks for itself and it learns from its mistakes, and it's always looking for, where can we improve, where can we do more.
Yep. So next question is around COVID. What has changed for you over the last year?
I mean, we very quickly moved most of our services online, and we were expecting it to be a lot more of a kind of shock than it actually was. And then what we did as a business is what I think a lot of other people did as well, which is we invested in IT, in training. So we've spent a lot of time in the last 12 months bringing in new skills into the business, upgrading the skills of some of the people that already work with us, looking at our online presence, looking at our website, looking at our internal IT, that, you know, the stuff that is not sexy at all, but actually if it's not, it's make everybody's life harder. And we're a very neurodiverse company, so 60% of Genius Within staff are disabled, identify as disabled, 43% identify as neurodiverse or divergent. And so, you know, if you've got smooth, streamlined IT systems, that's how you get the best out of people that might have compromises and might need those systems to be smooth. So we spent quite a lot of time doing that stuff, and we're still kind of tinkering and getting things launched. But yeah, we were in a privileged position to be able to do that. We feel very lucky about that. You know, if the pandemic had struck a couple of years earlier, we might not have been so storm ready. But we were in a really good position. And so we used that time to invest, which is also what our customers have done. And we have been part of their investment, if you see what I mean. So it kind of worked on that basis. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think that's what we did as well as a company. We looked at our website, we looked at our shop, we streamlined things, we started to do a lot more social media. You know, we did all that stuff. It's like when you're a chef,
Yeah,
you cook for everybody else, but you don't cook at home.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a bit like that in business. You're so busy all the time doing business with everybody, making sure your clients are okay, that you don't actually look inside and go, well, how can we make life easier for ourselves by having things more efficient? So
here, this is an important point that COVID proved there are people who are more resilient and are more creative, and they were the ones first off the mark. And I mean, we are quite blessed. We've got quite a large number of disabled employees, and nobody sat on their hands. Everybody did something. And because we got 30 years of heritage in technology and assistive technology, we found the benefits of actually using what we were using for people with disabilities, for people who are just trying to be more productive, especially locked up in the accommodation, small places to work in. So we found some really good innovative ways to help employees to have a healthier life, more productive life, and disability kind of almost lost its color. Everyone is the same now, almost. Not saying that it's gone away, but certainly
the difference is in the resources people have. You know, I mean, it's been so. I think, yeah, the disability has stopped being the kind, it has reduced in being the kind of differentiator of whether people are able to perform at their best all of the time or not, and it's been other things. You know, people who weren't in good living situations and didn't have the space that they needed. Right. People who were parenting, people who've been parenting young children. My hats off to anyone who is parenting children through this period. I mean, it's just, I don't know how you all did it. I really just commend everyone who's done that. I think it's been a really long slog, and I hope we don't have to ever go into a lockdown again for those families. It's so hard.
And working and doing the child. Yeah, it's.
Yeah. No, I know. But then, you know, what we've had to do is, you know, really orientate around working hours and being flexible in when people work and how people work. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And by the way, you must have some good advice for people who've really done this. I mean, when you are in a bit of a crisis situation, you just cope. You just do whatever it takes. What do you do for people once this is over? How do you get them to unwind and then
be tough, you know? It's going to be tough. I'm working on a Forbes blog about this actually, and you know, the end of lockdown anxiety, because it's real. You know, I know lots of people, particularly neuro minorities, who are saying, I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I was overwhelmed all the time. I didn't realize how bad my social anxiety was and how much of my kind of behavior it was framing, and how much of my kind of internal sense of chaos just came from kind of constantly having to be in different places and managing transitions. And so I think, you know, we've got to we've got to swing the pendulum back halfway rather than all the way where it was. You know, we've got to, what is that halfway balance? But equally, I think as well, after 12 months, we are all starting to feel a bit ragged for the not having seen each other. Do you know, there's so much informal knowledge transfer that you lose in a business when you don't hang out with each other. I mean, we're finding it at the moment. We had somebody who was about to renegotiate a contract with one of our suppliers because they thought that there hadn't been a new one since 2014. It was like, oh, no, we definitely did one in 2018. Oh, where is that? Now, that's the sort of thing that if you were in the office with someone, but she'd actually gone quite far down starting to renegotiate this contract before someone else picked it up in a meeting that said, no. Oh, why isn't that where it should be? Oh, find it for you. So those little things that you normally just pick up just by bumping into each other in hallways or you know, chatting while you're having a cup of tea, all of that is being lost, and that's a productivity issue as well. So I think, yeah, I think there's got to be some balance, and it's going to be really quite uncomfortable for anybody that doesn't like transitions, is going to find it just as hard transitioning out as they did, as some others felt it transitioning in. You know, there's going to be winners and losers in this.
So who do you think is going to be best positioned to lead on that transition? Is that the NHS? Is that the government? Is that the employers? Is that friends? Is that third sector? Who is the natural leader for helping people to come into the new normal?
Well, I think human resources really needs to take it seriously. You know, I think human resources is lacks dynamism. When it comes to neurodiversity inclusion, you know, it's very kind of, you know, compliance orientated as a profession, but there are some really kind of dynamic human resources ideas, and this is one of them. This is where, you know, what we should be doing right now is creating a strategy and going, right, let's audit people, let's talk to people, let's find out how people are feeling about this, let's do a bit of an anonymous survey for a temperature check. Let's think of all the ways in which we're going to have to manage this transition and what it's going to be like for different people. You know, we recently did a survey we did a sample of 100 of our current clients to say, now, if we had a magic wand and we could have made everything just perfect for you, would you have preferred to do the remote coaching, or would you have preferred to see us one-to-one? Just to kind of temperature check. What's the appetite for continuing to do this remotely? What's the appetite for going back into face-to-face meetings? And actually 50% were a straight no, keep it all remote. And then about 25% were wanted a blend of face-to-face and remote, and about 25% wanted all face-to-face. So that's the kind of thing you can do with your existing staff base right now. I mean, I don't think the NHS should really be leading on this. I think the government have got too many of their own agendas to really, you know, I mean, the government are looking at things like the transport industry, things like the cafe and restaurant industries. But, you know, the world is in transition with that stuff anyway. We have to reduce the amount of carbon that we emit. And that plays into the hands of reducing travel. Did you know in Europe, they are cancelling flights that are less than 2 hours? So you won't be able to take flights that are a less than 2 hour distance anymore. You'll have to get the train.
Oh, good.
Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. No more flights to Spain then.
Well, I think when we have a sea, we can get away with it. But yeah, so kind of within France, kind of flight and sort of
domestic flights, basically.
So this psychological impact, which we feel it now everywhere.
Yeah.
You think you have a good news that this is short term and people will settle down, or do you think we need to do something actively, prepare?
I think we need to actively prepare, because people will settle down, but they'll settle down better if they understand what the new rules are going to be. So one of the things, so if you think about a human brain, there's kind of the bits that do clever stuff like kicking footballs and designing websites and writing articles. And there's the bits that keep you alive, your fight, flight, freeze, fawn mechanisms. And then there's this sort of middle layer, which we kind of call the mammalian brain, because from an evolutionary perspective, it happened at the same time as creatures started being mammals. And it deals with kind of what's the rules of engagement, who's in charge, what am I supposed to do about this, where do I go for things, who's my helper, who's my colleague, what's the balance of power in the relationships. And all of those, what I'm noticing at the moment is that's what everybody's unsettled by right now. So that all of the power dynamics are out of kilter because of the way that we've been working. And so everybody's going, right, what are the new rules going to be? So I think as business owners and as managers, the thing that we need to be doing is being really clear about that stuff, possibly clearer about it than we were before. You know, being really explicit. This is this is going to be our new meeting schedule. This is what you're expected to do in advance of those meetings. This is where you know, being really, really explicit about the new rules so that people can settle those brains and feel a bit better, because yeah, the transition is going to be hard.
Right.
So back to me and my questions.
Yeah,
We
you
talk a lot.
so many tangents. I love it.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, NASA's, yeah, I did say that, you know, it would be structured from me, and
Yeah, but you're literally trying to herd cats, Anna.
But I mean, well, you keep trying. If you keep trying and putting a neurodivergent person into a like straight line question, it won't work. She's got so much ideas in her head.
well, that's the whole point. That's we want what's in Nancy's head to
Well,
come
that's
out,
exactly
and
right.
so our audience can learn all the things that are in her head, because you know,
Only a small part of what's in her
there's a
head.
genius within, right?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Okay.
So we talk a lot about disability here at Microlink, but for you and your team at Genius Within, you focus in and around hidden disability. What is your experience about working in the work of hidden disability?
The work of hidden disability. I mean, I've always worked in the disability space. So my first proper job was a support worker in social care. I used to do care in the community stuff. And I used to take care of adults with learning disabilities, also known as intellectual disabilities, many of whom were also autistic, many of whom also were wheelchair users. And so I've kind of always worked in some form of disability, hidden or not hidden. And I think one of the things that bothers me about, one of the reasons I decided to specialize in hidden disability is because for me, the barriers are so pointless. It's like we've got a whole swathe of people who could be actively participating in the workplace if it were just for a few tweaks. Do you know what I mean? If we just give the right technology, if we just support people with transitions, if we just allow people a bit of flexibility in their remote, in how much remote working they're allowed to do, if we kind of really support people around executive functions and do workshops and coaching around those things, then people can be included, they can be participated, and they can succeed. So, you know, there are other areas of disability where it isn't as hot, it isn't as easy. And so I feel like we should just clear this whole swathe out of the way, make it easy, and then we can focus on where it's harder and where people need more support and more help. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, it's about the resources that we're using, and we're using so many of our we're wasting so many of our resources. It's just inefficient, and it annoys me.
Yeah. Nancy, we've been doing disability for 30 years, and especially with neurodiversity for that long, way before it was cool to talk about neurodiversity. But I hear a lot about neurodiversity nowadays. It's really hot topic. Do you think we've turned the corner? Do you think we are up to greater times, better times, or is it still too early to conclude?
We've definitely turned a corner. I mean, yeah. I mean, it used to be when I was doing this early in my career, I was kicking on doors. You know, like, come on, people. This is about talent, not doing people favors. This is about participation. It's about human potential. And I feel like that argument is won. You know, that argument has definitely been won. But it's almost now like I need to say the other thing, which is it's not just about talent and participation. It's also about having the right supportive place. It's also about disability. So Susan Scott Parker, who I think you've got on this series, yes, she is having a discussion about this because she's been in the disability space for a long time as well. And she said, you know, why are we using the word neurodiversity and not disability? Is it because disability isn't cool? And I was like, that's such a good critique, you know, like, are we trying to say that neurodiversity is somehow better than disability? Are we saying, are we creating a separations because, you know, is it hierarchical? And if so, that's not actually what we meant. What we meant was actually a certain amount of this is a natural variation in humankind. And we should sort of, you know, be more flexible and incorporate that full variety. But actually that full variety extends all the way out. It extends to adults with learning disabilities. It extends to severe epilepsy. It extends to all of the other things. You know, it shouldn't be that we've used neurodiversity as a synonym for a kind of nerdy, geeky, autistic technology worker who happens to be super bright. That's where we've chosen. That's not where I chose to start. That's where the inclusion conversation has now embedded itself in so many people's minds. It's like corporate world started there because it was the least amount of change that they had to do in order to be inclusive. Mm-hmm. And actually it was always the start. It was never the end of the process. But it feels like it's got to a kind of stop, and that people are struggling to move beyond that stereotype and that very limited representation. I mean, the article that I've just posted on Forbes this afternoon asks the question, you know, if autistic technologists were, you know, if we let's say we were doing race inclusion like this, you know, what we're doing the equivalent of saying, right, so we need to increase racial diversity in this business. We've heard Chinese people are really good at maths, so we're going to hire some Chinese people for the finance team. Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
very good.
When you put it in that lens, it's like, okay, that's completely unacceptable. It's also completely unacceptable to do disability inclusion like this.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got to expand, and we've got to move on from that one stereotype. And we've also got to do it in a way that's actually inclusive. We can't just focus on hiring and porting people into roles and then expecting them to be absolutely fine when we've changed nothing about the company. So if the company is still set up around an able-bodied, neurotypical norm, then those people that we parachute in are going to struggle, and they're going to fail, and they're vulnerable, and they're going to then they're going to be even further back if they lose their jobs than they were the first time round, because now it's not about no one taking a chance on them, it's about them not being able to do it when somebody does. And so psychologically, that's a much further distance to then have to travel. So what concerns me at the moment is it's become very fashionable, but only one slice of it has become fashionable, and only hiring has become fashionable, not adjustments, not supporting people once they're in there, not making sure that they're getting promoted. And so, you know, ethically, we need to do a much more rigorous job on what the full picture looks like, rather than kind of ticking boxes and tokenism.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I was talking to a good friend, and he's autistic as well, and he said, I had great support and my manager left.
Yeah.
And I'm starting all over again with somebody else. And it's devastating, because I have to renegotiate everything. And you're absolutely right. There's too much focus. I have seen that in many campaigns, including Disability Confident campaign, hire more disabled people. Well, okay, if you don't have the right cultures and right adjustments for them, for their existing staff who have the conditions, then any new person coming in, they're going to find themselves in an completely alien environment, and they will drop out. And this time they'll lose their confidence for good.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got to support them while they're at work. And you can only do that if you make sure you have a great support for your existing disabled people, whether they are by birth or whether they've become disabled. Then you know you have the confidence to bring more people on board. And that, I totally agree with you. Yeah. But what I used to have the conversation with Suzanne Scott Parker about the same issue about disability. To me, it was a simple, well, if people have the right tools and the right support, do they need to say they're disabled? She said, well, it's a great idea. It's a great conversation. However, until we get to that situation, we need to have a word that we can focus people's attention to. And that's called disability.
Totally. So, you know, we're in that transition, aren't we? You know,
yes.
we've gone from kind of disability employment being something that we do to feel good about ourselves and something that we do to kind of, you know, be nice to people. And we've started creating the narrative that actually Inclusivity equals talent, equals diversity of thought, equals a better representation of the customer base that we're seeking to influence. And so, you know, there are kind of strategic advantages to being inclusive, but we haven't gone as far as to go, well, that means we need to change.
Yes.
Like, yeah, you can come in, but just, you know, once you get in, could you just be like us? Thanks. You know, it's like, not really, it's not really actually therefore making good on the promise of the diversity. You know, you need those different people to come in and change you in order for it to actually have the desired effect.
So next question, because we're only halfway through and we've taken up quite a lot of time already. So in terms, no, not that one. In the last year, we've all had to change our ways of working. Do you think this has been a positive or a negative for neurominorities?
I think we picked up on this a bit earlier, actually. I think there's been winners and losers. You know, I mean, I remember early on, Michael Vermeersch from Microsoft tweeted something about, look, listen, guys, I've been doing this remote work thing for a while.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
Actually really easy. Could all the extroverts out there stop booking me for Zoom meetings? I really don't need to see your faces.
But they were new to it, so
yeah, I know. It was really funny. I was like, yeah, totally get that. So, you know, I think, so for some people it was liberating. People who, you know, weren't as lucky as Michael Vermeersch and didn't actually already have a remote working contract now have remote working contracts and are going to be able to continually avoid rush hour sensory overwhelm, which is a big thing for ADHDers and autistic people. I think there's been a proliferation of assistive technology. I've seen that really, I mean, it's rare these days to go to a video conferencing and not see someone at least try and do captioning, which is amazing. You know, I mean, you guys are obviously nailing it. But in a lot of spaces, I'm seeing that now, where I wasn't seeing it before. So we've made some huge gains there, which are going to really benefit the disability community and the neurodiversity community long term. But as I said earlier, the informal communication depletion is also not very good for neurominorities because we're not always very good at picking up tone in emails and in messages. And when you don't have that kind of chat over a cup of coffee, then you're kind of even further able to kind of sense check whether people are cross with you or not. And so that's a kind of, oh dear, I've upset someone and I don't know how. And so there's
that all the time.
There's more of that going on than there would have been if we'd been able to kind of, you know, meet up and chat about things. So there's kind of pluses and minuses there. And there's also the people whose neurodiversity is about actually their strengths are visual spatial communication. You know, I find this really inhibiting. Do you know, I'd much rather be in a room talking to people. I'd rather be on a stage right now with this microphone talking to 35 people live, wandering around, you know, hearing the tone of the room. I've run trainings. And normally when I run a training, I send people off into group to do group exercises. And I kind of sit at strategic different parts of the room. I'm not eavesdropping their exact conversation, but I'm listening for the pace and the tone and whether people are happy or sad. And then I know who I need to go and chat to. But when you send everyone off into a breakout room, I mean, I wander through the breakout rooms. Hi, just tell listen, and then bugger off again. But it's, you know, it's kind of, it feels, it doesn't have the same fluidity to it. It feels kind of forced, and they stop talking the way they would have done when I arrive, and they suddenly start asking me questions. And so there's lots of things that are a lot harder. And auditory processing is my absolute worst. So I can't do this if there's no video. If it's just phones, I lose my mind. I can't do it at all. So yeah, and that's pluses and minuses. A win or loss.
In terms of learning from the last 12 months, what's the one thing you would want to get rid of forever?
Fatigue. Zoom fatigue. Yeah. Zoom fatigue.
Having a Zoom webinar.
Carry on doing Zoom meetings. I mean, that is incontrovertible, and we're going to do more of them we did before. But if we could intersperse them with a walking meeting, do you know, like I have a walking meeting with my dog, but it would be really helpful if I could have a walking meeting with my staff sometimes as well. Do you know, like it's So just a bit of Zoom. You know, those days where just something goes wrong and you're nicely planned. Which had lots of spaces in it, you had to drop in a couple of things that you weren't expecting, and then you find yourself back to back the whole day on a blinking video call, and by the end of it you're like, okay, I don't even know where I live now.
Helen's like that. Yeah, our director of corporate solutions. I mean, I look at my calendar's like it now, but her calendar, I used to look at it and go, I want to throw up, because it was just wall-to-wall meetings with either her team or clients, and I was like, Helen, when do you actually do the work?
Yeah,
if you're wall-to-wall like that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that means you work longer hours. That's what I do, and unfortunately it just extends to weekends and others, and that's a dangerous part. You get consumed by the work because people have more time to respond to your emails now.
I'm quite disciplined about that, actually.
You are absolutely right.
Yeah, no, I don't work at the weekends. I had proper burnout in 2018. I've lived through proper burnout, and I'm quite rigid about my boundaries now.
Well, I need coaching then.
Properly. So if there are leaders in businesses listening and they wanted to know where to start with the onboarding, the managing, the retaining, where would you point them? Which direction would you point them in? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to start with the people they've already got.
Okay.
What I would do, I'd say a combination of things. So, you know, you need to get some expertise in, but you need to be careful who you hire as experts. The idea of kind of expert advice in this field is quite difficult, because a lot of people from kind of clinical backgrounds don't understand the world of work. People with lived experience have a right to influence the debate, but they don't always have enough breadth of experience. So can be quite useful for temperature checking and kind of raising awareness and, you know, busting stereotypes and bringing in acceptance, but aren't necessarily the people that you need to tell you whether what you're doing is legally compliant with the Equality Act. So, you know, there's kind of, you need to really think about who you bring in. The Business Disability Forum, which I know you guys are members of, I worked with a few people. I worked with Neil Milliken of Atos. I worked with you know, a few different people in this industry, and we came up with a commissioning checklist for the kinds of things you should look for when you're commissioning advice. But I think the place to start is with making the adjustments that will enable the staff you've already got to work at their best.
Yeah.
And you can do the temperature checking. You can start a kind of employee resource group, and you can get that feedback, and you can hear where the problems are, and then you bring in the right people to help you solve those problems. Where businesses go wrong sometimes is they start the employee resource group, and then they ask the employee resource group to solve all their problems, which is not actually fair, because those people have jobs to do. And, you know, I mean, I hear things all the time, like, so what are you doing for adjustments for your staff now? Oh, well, we talked to Frank in IT because he's got an autistic nephew. And I'm like, great. So when your employee takes you to court and you're being asked to defend the reasonable adjustment decisions that you made, you're going to base them on the view of Frank, who works in IT, and his experience of a child. And they're like, doesn't sound so good when you put it like that. And you're like, no. So, you know, and then this is back to that whole kind of, you know, it is about talent, but it's also about disability inclusion. There is a carrot and there is also a stick. You have to do things the right way. But I think, yeah, if you start with what you've already got, and you start with kind of getting a good advice on adjustments at the individual level, you can then build those up into adjustments at the systemic level.
It's not always about legal challenges, but it's also not fulfilling somebody's full potential. I mean, that's one of the biggest losses, is productivity. So do you have a checklist of what employers should be looking at for in their employees, and say, well, that person is capable of doing more because they need a bit more help? What does that look like? How do you actually approach this with an employer and say, you've got hidden talent, people who could do a lot more for you if you just give them a bit extra support, whether it's a technology or whether it's some sort of a human support? So how do you go about informing, educating?
Well, we start with the employee life cycle. So we look at the whole life cycle of the employee. We look at the design of jobs, because actually sometimes that's where the problem is. You know, if we're designing for generalists, but actually what we need is a specialist. I mean, how many job descriptions have you seen, or appraisal systems where people are being marked on their team building skills or their influencing ability, and actually their job is data analyst?
Yeah.
And do you actually need all those other things? Because your job is to be incredibly precise and detailed and quick. And so, you know, when you design for jacks of all trades, but actually what you need are some masters, then right there, you've got a problem. So we start with job design, and then we follow it through what HR call the employee life cycle, through hiring, through onboarding and contracting. We look at things like, you know, how explicit contracting is about kind of the more psychological or social or rule-based social rule stuff. We look at how they're doing training and ongoing development. I mean, some things we've learned in Genius Within over the last 10 years is, and I'm sure this is the same for you guys, is that there's a very typical referral point for disability support. There's a lot of commonality. People come for disability support when they get a new manager, because all of a sudden the rules of what's help and what's not help changes. They come when they have a big change in IT system or building layout. And they come when they get promoted to manager, having been brilliant as a team member. All of a sudden they get promoted to manager without the right support. So if you look at those kind of typical bottlenecks, you can design around them. You know, you can say, right, part of your new manager onboarding program needs to include some workshops on executive function skills, because all of your specialists who are highly likely to be neurodiverse in some way are going to struggle with this element of the new role. You know, when you do your IT switch, have you considered the disability group within your new IT system? How are they going to handle this? Are you doing additional training? Have you built capability for assistive technology into the new system? You know, so you can look at things from that level, and that then clears a path so that you have less individual level failure. That's
a very good point. I mean, we do offer that consultancy to our clients for recruitment. This is very important. You're very right about point of entry to organization. If you get that right, then obviously work for the internal culture, then you can meet in the middle. Anna, I think we are running out of time. So any more questions?
We are, but I've got this great question now, which I know that Nancy sometimes uses in her training. So I want to flip it and ask her the question, which is, and so if a miracle happened and that change happened overnight, what would you see and what would you hear and what would that feel like the next morning?
I think the biggest difference would be in schools.
Yeah.
I think schools create expectations of the world of work that are rapidly becoming out of date and out just really actually unhelpful. And so I would see a different way of organizing ourselves as humans that was much more based around natural conversations, much more based around kind of pods of interest rather than systems of governance. Do you see what I mean? I think if that change,
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally and utterly.
And systems of obedience. You know, I mean, I've worked in schools doing cultural change work, actually. I've worked in prisons, and I've worked in lots of different workplaces as a consultant and as a coach and an assessor. And schools have more in common with prisons than they do with modern workplaces. And so that's creating a problem for two reasons. Number one, it means that anyone that can't fit into that system is excluded from achieving their potential in education, which means they enter the world with a massive chip on their shoulder and a lot of trauma to overcome. And that's not okay. So that's limiting right there. But even the people who aren't failed by that system, the people the people who succeed within that system are then mapping those behaviors into the way that they work. So they're replicating what they've experienced in schools. And one of the problems that we have is that the people who have benefited from the education system most are the people who are running the education system. So, so they don't find it very easy to understand that what they're suggesting and recommending and operating isn't
Work for everyone.
isn't good. Yeah. So the biggest change I would see would be in the education system. That's what I'd wake up and see tomorrow.
Yeah, me too. That's what I do too. exactly that. I
Was
think
it the old late Ken Robinson, wasn't he? So
Yeah,
Robinson, he was a great advocate
it's
about
awesome.
doing things differently, and because you
My
get-
kids went to a school where in our orientation as parents, the head teacher played Ken Robinson's very famous TED talk to all
Yeah.
the teachers,
Yeah.
and she ran a primary school like that, and it was amazing. But you know, she nearly had a breakdown because of how hard it was to keep the local authority off her back, basically. You know, so Genius Within doesn't work with kids. We're always being asked when we're going to work with kids, always. It's something I get asked literally every day. And one of my reasons for not doing it is that that's not my training. I'm an occupational psychologist. I studied the workplace, and I actually believe it's really important to practice within the boundaries of your occupational competence. And so I wasn't trained to work with kids, and so therefore I don't work with kids. You know, there are other people who do, and we've had a little look at kind of doing various things in the education system. But what we're doing at the moment, so to celebrate being 10 years old, we're about to launch a foundation called the Blooming Genius Foundation. And it's going to be a much more philanthropic affair. It's not going to be a commercial enterprise. It's going to be looking at ways that we can influence systemic change in the education system, not consulting the education system, but looking at ways we can influence systemic change, either by supporting the creation of role models and role modeling what good looks like in education, but also through looking at the legal system and the fact that 95% of educational tribunals brought by parents against local authorities are won by those parents. So the schools have a 95% failure rate anytime anybody takes them to court. So that should be telling us something, but it isn't. Yeah. And why isn't it? You know, why isn't that level of failure creating systemic change in the way that schools work? So that's something that we're doing. We're supported by Sienna Castillon in that, and two of our board members are leading on that project. And we're going to be, so Genius Within is a social enterprise. We're a CIC. 65% of our distributable profits go to reinvestment in services for our community. So we'll be donating ourselves to the Blooming Genius Foundation, but we will also be asking our customers to donate to the Blooming Genius Foundation. And at the moment, we're engaging in a listening exercise to listen to children with special educational needs, to listen to other activists in that field, and basically say, how can we support you? What's the thing that where would you like us to kind of direct some of our passion, influence, and ability to attract funding?
Well, a little fact most people don't realize: 65% of prisoners have neurodiversity. So,
at least, yeah.
So that's because society's failed them rather than they're the ones taking a wrong turn. So I totally buy into that, and you do know we are a huge supporter of Genius Within in every aspect. So you'll be definitely counting on our support.
They're the grace of God go I sense about this. You know, I didn't go to school for my last 2 years in secondary education. I simply refused to go. I stopped going at 14. And I'm very aware that if my skin was black or brown, that might have been a very different outcome for me. So what happened as a result of my not going to school is I was pretty much left to my own devices, and I was allowed to come in on a Monday, see my teachers, take my work home. And because I was an A student with white skin, I kind of got away with it. And I just think, you know, there are so many children who had the same level of distress at the school environment, who were forced to go to school in those situations, whose parents are criminalized for that, for not forcing them to go, who then become, you know, labeled as truants, who then find themselves in pupil referral units, who then, you know, that's how it happens. And I feel very much there, but for the grace of God go I on that one. And it's quite personal to me.
Henry Winkler is one of the amazing guys, you know, neurodiverse, dyslexia in his life, and he once told me, he came here for a campaign to schools. He said in America, after SAT tests, they know how many prisons to build.
Wow.
It's very true about a lot of those kids who fail. They know they've got a future in sort of in crime. So that's a sad fact about neurodiversity is not really tackled effectively in our education system.
And that's horrendous when you look at the racist overtones in the SAT test creation as well. That's just wow.
That's another area of the discussion in the future.
That's having you back on the show again.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about something else. So we are at the end. I'm not sure we've got any questions in the chat. Neil Eustace has been quite active. When you were talking earlier, he said, we have so many neurodiverse people here that do not want to be called disabled. They do not like that label, despite the fact the Act includes them under the label disabled, which allows them the protection they deserve. They themselves do not like the label.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite a...
Yeah. I mean, it's a debate and a discussion. There's lots of things that change around the language that we're using in the disability and/or neurodiversity space, and I think it's a conversation. It's an emerging conversation. It's like conversations that we have around race, where we change the language regularly, and the language kind of reflects and encapsulates the way that we're conceptualizing things. And I think, the neurodivergent, neurovariant I've heard recently, and neurodistinct I've heard recently as well, which I really like. Neurominority population isn't one single population. It's not a lump of people who all feel the same or think the same, or critically who have all had the same experiences. Some people feel very disabled by their condition, and therefore the identity of disability has meaning for them. Some people don't feel disabled by their condition and therefore don't identify with disability. And so there's kind of, all of those experiences are valid. The right way to approach language use is to ask people how they like to self-identify and to respect that and to work with it. But as professionals in the field, the right thing for us to do is to be aware of all of those different options and to kind of use variety in our company materials and articles and social media, so that we kind of cast that wide net and make sure that we're not excluding people. But I really did stop short in my tracks when Susan Scott Parker said to me, why is that? Is that because disability is bad and neurodiversity is good? Have we created that barrier? And what does that say about, is that internalized ableism against other disabled people? And that, I was like,
well, for me, when you said it immediately, I thought, well, neurodiverse is the brain, and disability is the physical. I mean, in my brain, that's where it went. So
here's some interesting stat. Lloyd's Banking Group, when they're famous for doing the workplace adjustment program 10 years ago, they did that starting asking all the people who've declared disability as disabled people within the organization. There were 800 odd. And one of the questions they asked, do you consider yourself disabled? More than half said no, even though they declared they were disabled. So it's not that condition defines your disability. It's the environment that does it. It's the society that does it. So if I'm a graphics designer, I'm dyslexic, I'm a graphics designer, why would I be disabled? I'm so good at in my elements. I can do my work so well. I never say I'm disabled. But if you put them in front of a system which is not accessible, then you are disabled.
And this is, what you're describing is the social model of disability. So the full model of disability is that people have impairments, and those impairments are things that they can or can't do. And the social model is, well, actually, if there are access ramps everywhere, then it doesn't matter that I use a wheelchair. If everybody understood sign language, it wouldn't matter that I have hearing loss or that I'm deaf. And so, those things extend. It's not limited to neurodiversity. The social model of disability is what all of our advanced economy legislation is based on. And it's based on the idea that if we design universally for a wider variety of people, we reduce the experience of disablement. And that's got to be a priority. But it's a priority for all disabled people and not just not just kind of, you know, the high flyers.
So we are at the end of our time, but there's we always end each discussion with a call to action. So it says here, if you're going to commission neurodiversity services, make sure you ask questions around qualifications, insurance and quality control.
And I'd like to add one to that, and representation. And
representation. And I think our Azaday is about to post in the chat a link to that from the Business Disability Forum.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the how to commission services for supporting. That's the commission that you were talking about. Brilliant. So there's the link to that. That's great.
Yeah. But
the other
bit is important. You know, if you want to get advice on how to be neuro inclusive, can you do that from a company that isn't neuro inclusive? Do you know, would you call a bunch of white people if you wanted advice on racial equity? Probably. so you know, it's the same. You need, yes, you need people with professional credentials so that the thing that they're kind of advising you on isn't just their own experience, but it's evidence-based. It's kind of, you know, it's going to incorporate a wide bunch of people. It's going to be safe. It's going to be legal. But you also, you know, are you hiring a company that can walk its own talk? Basically, I think it's important to know.
For sure it is. And then to create change, you need to be able to look beyond the individual and at the system. Our ambition is to change the system and increase the inclusive nature of our workplaces. And there's a short video, which is also going into the chat very shortly, which you can watch to explain that. Is there anything else? Oh, hang on, no, there's another one. To understand the impact these changes brings needs research, with Nancy's role as co-director at the Research Centre of Neurodiversity at Work. We are already working on research programs to look at the design of the workplace and make it more inclusive. And if you want to know more about that, you have to email Nancy directly. And her email's coming up in the chat as well. It's been amazing. Lots of comments there in the chat about brilliant talk and loved it. There aren't any questions, but that's because I think you covered everything. we did amazingly well in those.
We promised lots of action, and we got lots of action.
Minutes.
Thank you, Nancy, and I'm so delighted you were with us today. And no doubt we'll continue work together on lots of exciting projects in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
And we're sending out
thank you to stage. And thank you to our captioning people.
Oh yes, my clear text. Thank you.
Amazing people, and we love them. And I don't know how they keep up, but certainly Nancy, you must have been doing 300 words a minute. But I think Andrew has managed to capture everything.
And if I may comment, Nancy also posted the link to the Ken Robinson TED Talk while she was doing this webinar. How did you do that? I didn't even see you do that. That was magic.
And that link, I love, that's my most watched TED Talk.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Mine too. I've got all his books on my shelf behind here. I love it because it's so true. It's so true.
Okay.
I agree. Anyway, we're going. We got to go because we got to
go. 3 o'clock. And thank you for the audience as well. We got great participation.
See you next week, Diane Lightfoot.
Oh wow.
BDF.
Indeed. Okay. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Everyone,
Bye-bye. Thanks, Nancy. Bye.
Thanks, Nancy.